Got you.
Oh, it's that time. Everybody's favorite. What is up, everybody? Welcome into the DNVR Nuggets podcast Tuesday edition. Energy on 100 for the guy that always brings the energy every single day. We're presented as always by DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. Use promo code DNVR whenever you sign up. We are remote today and probably for the foreseeable future, although Thursday, I believe we'll be back in the studio for a free agency show. Just a little heads up. That show will probably be coming to you sometime around 6 o'clock. We want to let some of the dust settle. We'll be on the Twitter sticks kind of following along with you guys, but we'll do a show sometime around 6, maybe 7 o'clock, wrapping up all of the day's action in the NBA. I don't know how it'll go. Maybe right away, every spot gets filled. I know sometimes like right as the clock strikes 4 o'clock, every deal in the NBA gets signed somehow with no tampering. It's amazing. But maybe it'll be take a little bit of time for news to trickle in, and we'll cover it then. I am joined today by a guy. Is that shirt like your dad's shirt?
Yeah, it's an XXL flannel. I got to start checking the weather. I'm sweaty in this thing. It's hot. It's hot outside.
Do you not check the weather?
I haven't checked the weather in like 12 years, probably.
This is a wild development to me. First of all, it is summer, so you would probably default to it's probably going to be hot today.
Yeah, definitely a wrong first guess.
First guess. It's going to be warm. It's going to be warm every single day.
Okay.
Today, hopefully Harrison Wind is joining us from an undisclosed location. He's trying to get his Wi-Fi to work. Always reliable Wind. I hope he's here because we're talking about free agents, including those that made his big board today. Free agents as well as trades. In segment one, we have a lot to get to, so we're going to kind of dive right into the content of this. But the first group is going to be what I would call the primary guys, maybe the most interesting ones that Denver could try to target. Denver is restricted on what they can bring in, basically using their mid-level exception. That's their greatest lever. So we're going to talk some of the guys you might be throwing out bigger names. Sorry, not a lot of great free agents this year. And the ones that Denver can target are going to fit in a certain range. We're also going to talk a little bit later on about the trade market, which is where I think some of your slightly bigger names come from, and maybe just talk about what we think it would cost Denver to be able to acquire those players. So the first segment, third segment is going to have a lot. Second segment, probably less heralded names. We're going to talk about some of the guys that have been in the Denver system: Austin Rivers, Davon Reed, Gary Harris, as well as a couple unheralded guys in like Troy Brown, Amir Coffey, DeLon Wright. But we'll start off the top with some of what I consider to be the big names in free agency that Denver could sort of target to go after. And the first guy on the list is my guy, none other than Gary Payton. Gary Payton, who's 29, he'll be 30 years old by the time this season starts. He is a champion for the Golden State Warriors, famously the last guy added to the roster right there before right before the season began. He was picked up. They let go of Avery Bradley. Controversial decision. Turned out to be the best one. Closed, I think, 4 of the last 5 games of the finals for them as the defensive stopper. And he's a really good player. The biggest concern I have is, actually I have 2. One, he was basically a rookie last year, even though he had played in the NBA. That was his breakout year, his breakout opportunity. He's 29, almost 30 years old. He's probably already past his prime, which is weird to say. But he's already if you're buying him, you're buying does he have a lot more in it? Was it the Warriors culture? Are you going to be able to get something? And then if you have to sign him to multiple years, are you paying for 32, 33-year-old Gary Payton when he's only really proven this one time on arguably the best culture in the entire NBA. But as a fit, if we just start with the player vote, what do you think about Gary Payton, the player with the Denver Nuggets?
You have to love it. He's got to be at the top of this list for just about anyone going through the exercise. There are questions about him, but right now, among the fewer, due to the fact that we just saw it work, right? As a finalizing piece on a championship roster. Now, different roster, different culture. You know, how much of that was Steph gravity going to the school of Steph as well. I know he's not like a shooter, but just the movement, the Golden State sort of style of offense. Can Denver harness some of that as well? Obviously, Jokic is quite the hub. So I think there's utility in him as a corner shooter, what's upwind, cutting, that can be, captured as Golden State did. And defensively, we all know what he can do. So I think this is a result a lot of people would be happy with.
When you're joining us, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, I gotcha.
We're talking.
What do you think of Gary Payton? His fit with Denver?
Well, I mean, Gary Payton's the top free agent that Denver could get that's on my board. I think it'd be an incredible fit. Like, he's a dominant perimeter defender. He'd fit in with the offensive talent. I think it'd be great.
Do you think, though, I mean, the fact that he's 30 years old and has basically only proven this one time, I mean, does that give you any concern at all? Especially for a guy as narrow, like, he's pretty dependent on his athleticism. He's a super athlete, a freak athlete. He's a great defensive player, but guys that don't have a ton of other talents, like, you lose just 10% of your athleticism, does that hurt you? Do you worry about that? Maybe not next year, but if you were to sign him to a 2-3 year deal?
I mean, slightly. Like, he doesn't have that offensive upside, but he's just such a good defender that I think he'd fit in just the same way that he would with the Warriors.
It's funny because Peyton Watson is a lot of people talk about him the same way you would talk about a Gary Payton, just like a tenacious defender, like a really intense, never going to give up on a play, all over the place, really long, athletic. And then offensively, yeah, you're like, I don't know what you get from him. Some nights he'll make some shots or drive, but most of the time you're not going to be able to count on him. So it's kind of interesting. I think the second thing that concerns you about him is I just don't know if he's going to be gettable. The Golden State Warriors have one of the very few owners who has already shown to be willing to spend on the margins, and he is a margin, and he was so good. The fact that you closed the finals with Gary Payton, you actually literally ended, the last several games. Man, Harrison already gone again. Finished the last several games with him, on the court. To me, it just makes me think they're probably going to be willing to pay what Denver can, which is that taxpayer MLE.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if they went through all that effort to keep him around, to sign him, and then, let's be honest, kind of clap themselves on the back for the move, right? That they would then just not pay him if possible.
This is such a good point. I love this because what you're referring to is to the big writers in the Bay. You have Marcus Thompson and Anthony Slater. They gave a lot of access to write the story that was using specifically Gary Payton to talk about how smart they are. So you're right. That's very much they're feeling themselves. They're probably going to continue to want to pump their own propaganda.
Yeah.
So if he's available, it would be great. He is an unrestricted free agent, which I think is an important part of this because as we get into some of the restricted free agents, there's just not a lot of names out there. And if you go after a restricted free agent and it ends up costing you 3 or 4 days or however long it ends up taking you, there's a really good chance that Denver could end up wasting, not being able to sign all these other guys. So you get rejected or matched in free agency. And now you're even more desperate, which I think is a real risk because some of the names, my favorite names on these lists, are going to be restricted free agents. The next guy I have is another one that's super interesting. Victor Oladipo, 30 years old. Only 60 games played the last 3 seasons. He has a right quadricep tendon injury, had surgery on it. This injury is near and dear to me. This is the injury I sustained several years ago. So I just know how hard, the thing about a quadricep tendon is it connects to your muscles. And when that thing goes, you can't exercise that muscle. You have to rebuild that entire muscle. So, something that, I've obviously struggled to do as a non-professional athlete, but even as a professional athlete, we're talking about 60 games in 3 seasons with more time being unavailable to practice and play than time that you were able to. That being said, he did have an impact for the Miami Heat, a 2-way impact, offense and defense. at times throughout this playoffs. Wind, what do you think of Victor Oladipo as a target for Denver?
Number 2 on my list, only played in 8 regular season games for the Heat last year. One of those games was a 40-point game in April against Orlando, the last game of the regular season. And then he just like had Jaylen Brown in jail in the playoffs at times in that matchup. Look, he's had injuries, but I think, there's a sneaky chance that you buy a little low on him and then he starts to rediscover some of that flash that he had a couple years ago.
No question. That's the exciting part about Victor Oladipo. What do you think, Vogt?
As far as working with the MLE, this is the be bold play, right? This is the sort of take a big swing. But the worst case scenario is that he literally is missing large chunks of the season. And that's not just that one injury. Like, it's sort of something he's dealt with his whole career. Injuries are always hard to project. Maybe he's fully healthy. But I kind of feel like what's scary about this for the Nuggets is, well, the last thing they need is another high upside play that could work out with him not playing games at all.
Specifically in the backcourt.
In the backcourt. So I suppose this is the be bold move, but it's a scary one too, I think, to some extent.
If you just look at the injury risk, like, we know Jamal Murray is not going to play every game next year. The Nuggets don't want him to. They're going to want to load manage a little bit, especially early on. Right. Michael Porter hasn't proven to be a guy that can really play that kind of minutes, and I don't think the Denver's even going to push it. I think they're going to try to play him 60 games next year, even if he's fully healthy. So you're already talking about 2 starters that are going to be limited. Do you really want to bring in a guy who, by the way, Oladipo, that you would sign him, I think, with the intention of him being a starter, albeit your 5th starter? I think you would sign him understanding that if he's not available for a handful of games, like, that's plug and play another guy. But that's by far the biggest concern. I love this move. The other biggest concern, I should say, Oladipo, and I've even heard this, just from different people around the team. Oladipo has been a reclamation project, obviously for the last few years as he's coming back from the injury. So he's bought into the small role, a la a DeMarcus Cousins. In fact, I would equate him to a DeMarcus Cousins in this one way.
There's a comp there, yeah.
He bought into being a backup center this year to get his value back up to where people viewed him as a starting center. This is part of the bet that he made and why it was a perfect fit. And we'll see if it pays off. It's one of the reasons we're not sure if DeMarcus Cousins will be back. Oladipo, I think, has the same perspective. Remember, he's like a bet on myself guy. I'm a superstar, gets traded away, goes to Indiana, improves it, becomes an all-star, becomes the most improved player, then gets hurt. This is a guy that I think has the reputation as being someone who views himself as maybe better than what he actually is. Does 3 years flatten a person? Does he have a perspective now as I just want to play and extend my career and be a part of a team, and I don't need to be a 2nd or 3rd option? I can be a 4th, 5th option. I don't know that, but I know that's the concern with him, is that he really has never been that, other than this last year when he was just trying to get back on the court. So does that concern you at all, Harrison, that maybe you bring him back in and he thinks he's a 15, 16 shots a night kind of guy?
A little bit. The injuries concern me more. That's definitely the big concern because, like you said, like, they can't have a guy who's an injury risk on day one of the regular season in the backcourt, especially with, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. If you're going to go big on this MLE and use it all, the 3 years, 19 or 20 million, you want that guy to be durable and to be available, especially on Denver. So another guard with an injury history kind of freaks me out a little bit. But yes, to the other point, I also feel that way. Like, Victor Oladipo wants to get back to being an all-star level player. Maybe that could work in a good way with Denver because he's just that much more hungry. But ideally, yeah, I think you want a guy who's 100% going to be happy in his role. Is Oladipo going to be that? Maybe if he's on a winning team in a winning environment on a contender, but there is some risk. I'm with you there.
And to his credit, we just saw him do it. But you're right about the context that fits around that.
And the context was Miami, great culture, a lot of guys that are going to hold you accountable. By all accounts, he worked his ass off throughout, behind the scenes to be ready to play by the time the playoffs got there. But you also have Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, like a lot of good defensive players around you. Because if you remember, I think it was game 4 against the Celtics where Jimmy Butler missed, and Oladipo had a monster second half in that game. I can't remember. I think Jaylen Brown had like 35, 40 points in that one. Oladipo in the second half guards him really well. Got a couple steals on him. I think he ends up with 6 turnovers. Heat win the game. So in a playoff series against all-star caliber guards, he actually made a pretty big impact defensively. So it makes you think that'd be great. And I do think the fit of, I've said this before, but quick first step players with Jokic, I'm just so intrigued to see what that looks like. So to me, Oladipo maybe has the highest upside play of the realistic targets, but he has such a low downside play that I would be pretty terrified, especially if you talk about Harrison 3-year commitment. Does Denver get into a point where they're committed to 2 players, Michael Porter and Oladipo, who over the life of Jokic's next contract are big question marks? I would be so scared of that. And if you had an injury to one or both of those guys, you pretty much punt on your opportunity. At that point, maybe you have to trade Jokic because you're we have $50 million of injured players going forward. What can we do? So it carries an enormous amount of risk, but it also carries an enormous amount of upside.
A ton of upside,
guy.
But if you're Denver, do you need that upside?
Yeah, I think you just kind of I don't know how much everyone wants to hear this. I think they need to just hit a double into the gap here, more than they need a home run.
The thing is Victor Oladipo might be the double into the gap. I don't know if he's not a home run.
Sure,
Victor Oladipo in this instance is a good player that I think gets you over the hump. But Cody Martin is my next one. And you could really group Cody and Caleb together, although I kind of want to keep them separate. Cody, I think a little bit more of the defensive-minded of the 2 players. He's shot 38% from 3 last year on 160 attempts. It was a bit of an outlier for his career. He's been much lower than that. Maybe the best perimeter defender that Charlotte had, and they just hired a defensive coach in Steve Clifford, who probably is going to want him. And what scares me the most, restricted free agent, best perimeter defender on the team, a coach who's going to be screaming at the GM, don't you dare trade my one defensive player away or lose him. And I just worry that he's a guy that Denver's going to like. And if you did make an offer to him, if you identified him as your guy, you might end up waiting a couple days and then miss out on him anyway.
Yeah, there's that. But I mean, how many guys is Denver really going hard after in free agency? I saw today that our friend Keith Smith reported they extended qualifying offers to Vlatko Čančar and Davon Reed. One of those not surprising in Reed, I think. The other maybe a little surprising. But how many?
I thought we had talked about this. I had heard that was going to happen. I thought we had talked about this, Harrison.
That Vlatko was coming back for sure.
I think Vlatko might be a mainstay on the Nuggets roster for the Jokic era.
Wow, that's surprising to me, and kind of
on a minimum.
Yeah. Anyways, that was a little surprising to me, but. With these roster spots filling up, how many guys are the Nuggets legitimately going after in free agency? 2 at the most.
2, right? Yeah.
I think they really, you try to get intel, I think, on a Cody Martin. Another thing is when you bring in a new coach, maybe there's a lot of moves to be made. There are definitely some, Charlotte is an interesting situation where I could see them being willing to move on. It's just such a huge risk. I think he's worth it. In a vacuum, if he's an unrestricted free agent and he wanted to sign here, I think he would be worth that price. The restricted free agency makes it so dangerous for Denver.
Yeah. Both the Martin twins I'm in on. Caleb Martin with Miami, I'm especially in on, but I doubt Miami's going to let him get away. And then Cody Martin, like you said, the point about Steve Clifford's a good one. You just wonder with Charlotte if they would get a little frugal and stingy on how much they're spending this offseason. They're a candidate to do that, right?
Always a candidate for that.
Where do you guys see either of the Martin twins fitting into the rotation positionally, starting back up? How do you see that shaking out?
What's nice about them is I think that they are starters. Again, everybody thinks a starter. Usually the 5th starter, especially if they're a defensive-minded player, is not an all-star. So him being Cody Martin in particular, a guy that's going to be taking 6 shots a night anyway, just to keep you honest type of shot. He knows how to cut. He actually played for Musselman in college, who I think is one of the better sort of grooming players for the NBA. They play a very NBA style system with lots of movement off ball. I think he would fit in really, really well. So I think he would be a starter. That Christian Brown, if you look at the best scenario for Christian Brown, that next year he could probably surpass him. And then you have a very solid backup shooting guard. So he's a guy that's good, but also fits as into a backup role for you as this like sixth guard or whatever.
And you can play him at 3 as well a little bit too if need be, right? So
Yep.
Yeah. They do fit the criteria of bigger guards and wings.
Yep.
And
Length.
that is, I think, the number one thing that Denver wants to change with some of its role players, if it can, this offseason. Just get bigger.
Right.
Bigger guards, bigger wings than what they've had in the backcourt. I know that's what they want. The Martin twins fit that. Gary Payton doesn't exactly fit that, but he's such a good defender.
His wingspan, he's got like a 7-foot wingspan.
Yeah, but I mean, I think what they have in mind is just taller as well. I know length is a catch-all, as Calvin Booth says, but like Caleb Martin and Cody Martin at 6'5" with that 6'10" wingspan, that is ideal height and length, I think.
Yeah. Gary Payton maybe works for me lengthwise, but I'll take the point. The last one I have in here in the first segment here is Bruce Brown. Let's just sneak him in here. Unrestricted free agent. To me, this might be actual number one. Oladipo maybe in theory has a higher upside. I don't even know, but I think maybe as a two-way player a little bit more. Bruce Brown did shoot 40% from 3. It was an outlier for his career, but he was very good last year as a 3-point shooter. He's a really good defender. Brooklyn maybe is falling apart. We'll wait to see. Maybe they just move on from him anyway and try to allocate those resources elsewhere. But to me, he's almost the classic. Like, if you think back to the George Karl Nuggets, they always had one guy, DeMar Johnson, or, they always had the one guy that would be the like token defense only guard. That would be Bruce Brown, with the added value of he can kind of do stuff on offense.
He made it work with that cut, the floater, when he can hit enough open shots. He's not creating anything in any sense of the word, but he can finish some plays.
6'4", 6'9" wingspan. So like he's not long, but he's also not short. He's sort of like at the par I would call for what we're talking about.
Yeah, he's Gary Payton, but just not as elite, I think, of a defender and just ball hawk, but he does a lot of the same stuff Gary Payton does. And then on offense, he's your fifth option that is just kind of have to, find his niche. But he was able to do that on a Nets team with the type of offensive firepower that Denver and Golden State had. That's how Gary Payton was able to do it. So I think it'd be kind of a natural transition there.
The one thing I think Bruce Brown, I could be wrong on this. If you're playing with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, it's like playing with James Harden, which he also played with. You just stand in the corner or on the wing, right? You're not touching it. In a Jokic system, you might need to touch the ball a little bit more. That's one difference. Is like you have to run some kind of dribble handoff or just at least be available in this or that. So I think he might be my top choice though. Like of these 5 guys, which we have as sort of the top grouping here of guys that would, if they were here, they would probably all start at shooting guard. I think Bruce Brown is my top choice. What about you, Vogt?
Yeah, him or Peyton, but Brown probably feels more realistic at this point.
What about you, Harrison?
If I'm getting a healthy Victor Oladipo, he might be my number one. Just in terms of his 3-point shooting, his defense, and just being a mainstay at that 2 guard, he might be my number one.
By the way, he might be cheaper than some of these other guys because of those injuries. Like there's a real, as much as there's a risk, but if he might be a guy that there's not a lot of teams that want to offer him 3 years, that don't want to offer him big numbers, and you might be able to get him as a continued reclamation project.
Definitely. And other than that, it's probably one of the Martin twins, kind of because what you were saying, Adam, about Bruce Brown fitting into a Jokic ball system. Like, can he dribble and pass and like come off DHOs and run a little pick and roll? Can he do anything other than just stand in the corner or stand in the dunker spot? Maybe. But I have confidence that Caleb and Cody Martin could, because they did do that more last season. They're not as locked down to defenders as Bruce Brown is, but I've got a little more confidence that they're going to be more versatile offensively. So I'd probably slot them slightly ahead.
I would say if we're already doing this kind of trade-off of just in terms of like the Nuggets need something different at 2, then just lean all the way in for me and get the most prolific defender you can get. But that's just my perspective.
Why don't we take a break? Those are the big names. Again, those might be the big ones.
They might be too big of names too.
They really might be too
honestly,
big of names.
Are, I would say, probably likely all out of the price range, or just a lot of them are unattainable. I think like Gary Payton. I can't see Golden State letting him get away or him leaving Golden State. Both Martin twins.
The restricted free agency part of this is just so tough.
The odds are both those guys will be back. Bruce Brown, just because of how combustible that net situation is, he feels like he could be out there. Oladipo, he seems like a Miami guy. I feel like there's probably something there with, you scratch our back, we
we got it. Yeah, scratch each other's back.
You know the metaphor I'm going for?
Yeah.
Like they helped him get back to this level. He's going to stay there and help them out too. So I don't know.
I will say this. I see this comment on the Hard Knocks podcast. The hosts mainly talk about the Nuggets as if they're trying to shed cap and be below luxury tax. I listened to that podcast. I heard their perspective. I will say this. I feel very confident saying that the Nuggets front office has the leeway to spend into the tax this offseason. I don't know if they will. A lot of this is going, I don't think they're going to spend it just to spend it. Like they are going to maintain that flexibility, but I do know that that is not a limitation. Like you can't do that unless you get this, and this. I think that they have the ability, or I shouldn't say I think, very confident that they have the ability to spend if they have the players to do it. I don't think they're going to spend a ton of money on guys that they don't really believe in. You're not going to do that for untradeable contracts, which is where they might end up, seeing as how things have played out so far.
Here's the deal. Breckenridge Brewery is the official beer of DNVR, and I'm going to push that Avalanche Amber Ale on you. I'll give you 3 seconds at home to guess why. Because they're the champions, baby. Congrats to the Avs. Congrats to the Avs. Die hard. Celebrate. Wash that season and that cup down, baby, with a fresh Avalanche Ale from our friends at Breckenridge Brewery. They've got a lot of different delicious kinds of brew. If you want to know where to find it, you punch it into the Breck Beer Locator. Google that. Bookmark that. It's a sweet tool. You tell it what you're looking for. You tell it where you live. It tells you where to go to get that sweet, delicious Breck brew in your life. Check it out. They're our friends, and one of the best ways you can support DNVR is by supporting our friends. Speaking of friends, our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook, are switching their focus now from the ice to the octagon. We're talking the calf slicer. We're talking the Peruvian necktie. There are tons of ways to come out on top in the octagon for UFC 276. There's one more. With DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC, new customers can bet $5 on any fighter to win and get $100 in free bets, whether they win or lose. I don't get that. That's not really how betting works. So whether it's a knockout kick, a powerful punch, or just you making a lot of money with your same-game parlay, get in on this action right now. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. It must be Colorado, must be 21 or older. And do we have the graphic card with the details? Gambling problem. Call 1-800-422. I don't know the number, Kel, and it's not
1-800-522-4700.
There it is. 1-800-522-4700. And we're back.
All right, we are back
it
here.
looks like you can just say see show notes for details. That's how all the cool podcasters are doing it now. So
Okay. Okay, cool.
See show notes for details. Boom. They're right in the show notes.
Load off my shoulders.
Segment 2 here, we're going to go over a couple of current or former Denver Nuggets players, as well as some, I'll call them sleepers, I guess. Sleeper picks, although there's even a chance that they're not attainable. This is how tough this free agency period is going to be. The first one we're going to go to, everybody's favorite, the former and original Mr. Nugget, Gary Harris, an unrestricted free agent. Now, here's the thing. If you swapped Will Barton for Gary Harris, I honestly think that in the regular season, you would have no drop-off in terms of Denver's performance. And in the postseason, you would be better prepared for what you were going to see. So I think this would be okay, I know that's not a trade, but if that were to happen, you brought in Gary, got rid of Barton, it would kind of work. Gary Harris, in part, wanted to leave Denver. Denver, I think, ready to move on with him so he could spread his wings and maybe, up his value heading into this period. Not so sure how well that worked out. We'll find out. We'll see if his bet worked. But he might be one of those guys that, hey, first day goes by, he's not getting the big offer. Does Denver look at that and say, hey, man, the system, the guys? Is it realistic at all, Harrison, that Gary Harris could be back?
Oh man. I mean, he had a little bit of a bounce back season last year, I'd say. 38.5% from three, 5 3-point attempts per game. He was great from the corners, especially. Really good from the corners, like incredible. He showed, late in his Nuggets career, the final days of his Nuggets career, or the final shining moment of his Nuggets career, I should say, in the bubble, that he can be that 3-and-D role player on a good team. He can come off the bench, lock down defensively, and I guess he didn't have much 3 or offense to his game in a lot of those bubble matchups, but he was a good defender. I guess I could see a world where he is playing a similar role as he was in the bubble on the Nuggets next season. But again, the injuries, right?
Yep.
Played 61 games last season. That's a very healthy year for Gary Harris based on, his real career after his first couple of seasons. 61 is a lot of games for him to play. Am I signing him and kind of banking on health with Gary Harris? I don't know if I want to hitch my wagon to that.
I completely agree. I was going to go right there as well. I agree with everything you said, Adam, and it would be a vibey kind of thing. He comes back, everyone's
Would
excited.
it be vibey though? Honest question. Would it be vibey? Like if the Nuggets announced that they have signed Gary Harris, would it be like, awesome, the band's back together, or what the hell? We already did this.
No, I think the fan base would be excited, to be honest. I actually do. I mean, we just did this thing. There's something to that, but I think people would be really excited until the effing core injury in January. I'm not going to, but I'm just saying, like, that's the fear. And of course, I'm not penciling him in or rooting for it, but that's the fear.
If we're speaking vibes specifically, there would have been a lot more vibes with the Gary Harris return if Tim Conley was still here.
Good point.
Now I just feel like, this has nothing to do with on court or, anything, but we're in just a different stage now. We're in a different era, I think.
Yeah. All right. So after that, we get to Austin Rivers, another, unrestricted free agent. It's weird to think because none of us have thought about Austin Rivers as the starting shooting guard. If you were to roll back everybody we just talked about, Austin Rivers, did you say you brought him up as the starting shooting guard? Does it feel like he is a starting shooting guard on a championship contender caliber player?
No. I mean, I think he can be an approximate of some of what we're talking about here, though. A very good perimeter defender that can hit some open shots and isn't a total zero on offense. I mean, I do think there's also this fear of he's not quite as good a connecting piece as some of these other guys that are so limited to the point where they don't try some of the things that Austin tries. I think you can do better. But at some point, like, there is going to be, after the exception and all that, like, there's going to be a couple roster spots to burn and some minimums to hand out. And if Austin wanted to come back on one, I would be intrigued. I think he was a helpful player. I honestly think he was a better player for Denver last season than we realized. And if the whole season didn't feel so futile, then maybe his contributions are viewed as larger, actually.
It is weird, though, Harrison, because Austin Rivers filled the role of, like, guys are hurt, so let's plug him into this role. But now if you get Jamal Murray back and you have Monte Morris and Bones Highland as your backups, I don't think either of those guys you're looking to start, game one, at least of the season. And then you have Christian Brown as your sort of like fifth defender. The question really is, who is your starting two? So in a weird way, Austin Rivers either fills that role or he ends up filling the sixth guard role.
Right. I get that. Yeah.
Does that mean does that take him out of the running in your eyes?
Yeah, I can't see him being the starting two guard. Like, no way, right? No way.
I
could see it, but I think
I can see it. I'm not saying it would have been plan A a month ago. Like, you would have told me this is a successful offseason, but where we are now,
I can do better.
See it.
You can definitely do better.
Oh man, I'm not ready for that. Christian Brown, yeah, the Nuggets see him as a 2. We know that. So I think naturally that lowers Austin Rivers' chances of coming back. But I mean, who would you rather play next season, Austin Rivers or Christian Brown? Austin Rivers, obviously. So if, like, push comes to shove and, you strike out on your first couple options, maybe Austin Rivers is a choice.
And it might come down to that. Like, this is the thing, is Denver might be in a position where they go after a Cody Martin, miss out on him. Bruce Brown's off the board. Gary Payton's off the board. All these other guys that you had are off the board. And it's like, hey, we're going to go with this. And then, look, let me say this. There are positives and negatives to it. I do think that Christian Brown is a player I'm intrigued by. I want to see him in Summer League before I make any proclamations. I want to see all this stuff. But I'm intrigued by the fact that he could be a player that makes an impact by the end of next season. But I'm also very aware of the fact that he might not. And like, if you go into the season, so if Austin Rivers was there, I do feel like Christian Brown's going to get more opportunities next year. And you're almost up the odds of that, which could be a positive, but you also up the exposure of it. I don't love it, but I also think, here's the thing about Austin Rivers. A lot of these guys we're talking about is like, ooh, even a Bruce Brown, we're like, man, he could fill the role here or there. Like, Austin Rivers knows his role on this team. By the end of his tenure in Denver, Austin Rivers was not early on, the jab step not going, like that stuff was driving you nuts. I felt like it got less and less over time. So if Austin Rivers was back on the team next year, I do feel like he would be offensively, at least, the best version we've seen of him in the system.
To be clear, I do not think this would be a good offseason. But like, could I see it resulting that way? Yeah. Like, could I see Denver's front office saying like, we missed on some of these guys. Can Rivers represent what we're looking for? Sure. But you can do better. I guess I just find myself inclined every time Rivers is mentioned to point out by the end of that season, he was helpful. I don't know if he's as helpful in this upcoming roster construction, but I don't hate the idea of him coming back to the team in a vacuum.
Here's a comment I hear. Can't trade Thrill to start Rivers. What are we doing here? Haha. I do think there's something like Barton is a better player than Rivers when you factor in like both ends of the court. What does Denver need? They need defense. Austin Rivers is a better defender. So even though he is worse at so many other things, does Denver need Barton's ball handling and shooting and stuff to the same degree once they get Jamal Murray, Michael Porter back? I don't know. And if those guys aren't back, then the season's kind of screwed anyway. Like you're kind of effed. I don't think you would trade Will Barton for nothing. Maybe Barton ends up bringing you back a center so you don't have to spend free agency and other assets to acquire a center. Maybe that's what it is. So again, it's not just a get rid of Barton at all costs, bring in Austin Rivers. It's just that it is a scenario I see this playing out as. Davon Reed, we kind of have him coming back to the team as this sort of like 2-3 hybrid that's a little bit more of a 3. Is there any world, Harrison, in which Davon Reed is counted on to be a rotational guard?
Yes, absolutely. Could he be the backup 3 next season? Maybe. I mean, if they're not able to get,
but that's a forward.
Trying to get,
but that's a forward. I kind of feel like Davon Reed might be there anyway. Like he's in that mix. What I'm saying is, could you roll into the season next year? I'm just trying to again make sense of where we're at right now. Could you roll into the season with Monte and Murray as your starting 1-2? And Bones and Davon as your backup 1-2 with Christian Brown as the 3 there. Like, could you roll into that knowing you might be making a Monte trade at the deadline, but you're starting the season with Monte as a starting 1 next to Murray?
No, I would not feel good about a second unit of Bones, Davon Reed, and Austin Rivers and Christian Brown. Sorry. I would not feel good about that at all. Okay. Man, I'm still thinking about Austin Rivers potentially starting at the 2. That really threw me for a loop. I
mean, look, here's what we're getting at. People can understand the subtext here. We're racking our brains to see what the plan is, because when we look at it, trades almost seem like the only thing, and we don't see the trade, but it almost seems like that because some of these free agent names, they just don't seem like they're going to be available. They don't seem that exciting. So the chance that an Austin Rivers is part of the plan, like that's just, it's more possible than I would have guessed 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I'd rather Austin Rivers than Davon Reed. If I need a backup 2, if we're talking backup 2s, I'd probably rather Austin Rivers. I just have more confidence in him. Yeah. If you're just slotting together a bench unit, I've got more confidence in Davon Reed though, than Christian Brown to be able to play next season. Yeah, I like Davon Reed. I don't really want to rely on him though, so that's kind of where I'm at.
He would be a really nice, non-reliable piece. Even you don't think you want to depend on him, if you will. That killed him. Troy Brown Jr., I want to go really quick here. Restricted free agent, although the Chicago Bulls did just add Dalen Terry, who's sort of in that same mold. Troy Brown is a player that I like because I think he's smart, can do a lot of different things and defend well. But I think he's also just another team's Austin Rivers. Like, if you're counting on him to be something more than just like an option to you in the second unit, I feel like you're going to be sorely disappointed. I don't see him being a big move.
A lot of this is why I'm still really curious to see what Barton and or Monte could get you at some point between now and the deadline, because it may be your best route at a significant upgrade here. And again, like I see some people in the chat saying who wants to take on Barton's salary. A 15 million expiring is not like a
Also, like, people just don't realize this, man. Like,
dude, I saw
Tim Hardaway Jr. Like, people will be like, "Oh, what about Tim Hardaway Jr.?" Same player as Barton. Like, you talk to Dallas, they're like, there was a thing today. Like, a bunch of our PHNX people are like wanting to try to, how do we acquire Barton? What do we have to give up to get him? Not, are you guys willing to unload him? But what are you willing to give up? He shoots 38% from three. He has 4 assists a game.
Right.
Like,
that's a potential route to an upgrade. It doesn't just have to be like, we'll pay you to leave. So
you know what we need? We need a friend of the show, Andy Bailey, to do one of those blind comparisons of Will Barton and a bunch of other shooting guards. I want to see how that turns out.
Yeah. Some two guys that I like that are sleeper picks that I think are real options. Amir Coffey, restricted free agent for the Clippers, 6'7", a career 38% 3-point shooter, a solid defender. I don't know if he's an elite defender, but he's got length. He's kind of almost, maybe a PJ Dozier-esque defender in that he's got the mobility and length and smarts to know where to be, even if he's not a guy that you're like, oh, he's about to lock up Damian Lillard. Like, he's just a solid defender who also shoots the ball really well. One problem, he's a restricted free agent for an owner that doesn't seem to care one bit about how much he is spending. Like, literally, there's one owner in basketball that might sign every restricted free agent they have, forever, and that's Steve Ballmer. So Amir Coffey is a guy that might or might not have a real chance at a role for the Clippers. Yet, even if he doesn't have a defined role, they might match anyway because they like him. So, but Amir Coffey, Harrison, do you have any Amir Coffey takes?
He's a lefty, which is nice. I like that. That'd be nice to add to the rotation for sure. Amir Coffey, I like him. Seems like a guy that could have come up in the Nugget system that we'd be really high on. He had a couple nice games against Denver. I think he had 18, 7, and 4 against Denver in that January win that the Clippers had. I like him. Would I feel better about him or Austin Rivers or Davon Reed as the backup shooting guard or Christian Brown?
Yes, it's the starting shooting guard, really. We're talking about starting at this point.
I like Amir Coffey off the bench.
Vogt, do you have a Amir Coffey take?
I like him off the bench too. Just, again, another guy that could be tougher to get than maybe should be.
Here's the thing we keep saying about off the bench. Like, we keep forgetting that the Nuggets' two-way impact is less important this season than ever before. This is why, like, even in Austin Rivers, it's not, again, I think there's better players out there. But again, thinking about what he adds to the offense, it's does he screw up the offense? Because the offense is fine 4-on-5. Just does he screw it up? Can he just be there as a guy that makes 35% of his open threes and keeps the ball moving? So even a guy like Amir Coffey maybe fits that with 6'7" frame to him.
I don't know enough about his defense, to have a solid take about how worth it he is.
A guy who's a very good defender, DeLon Wright, the last guy on the list of this section here. DeLon Wright, unrestricted free agent, veteran player. He's played for a ton of teams, mostly bad teams. This is an interesting note. I was looking at all the teams he's played for. They've all been lottery teams his whole career somehow, minus, what was it last year? Where was he playing last year?
Atlanta.
So let me go through the list here. Yeah, Atlanta. So he's been on all of these like tanking bad teams. I guess early on he was in Toronto, but these tanking bad teams, he does have, I know that these stats are noisy, a plus 2.4 defensive box plus minus, which I think outside of Gary Payton is the highest of any of the guys that you'll see. Those are messy stats, especially for guards, but it should be noted he shows up really well in the advanced metrics. And then, another guy that just I think would be able to figure out how to play in this system and be a low usage guy. Where are you at on DeLon Wright?
Well, he's more of a 1-2. Like, he's more of a ball handling guard. So I think he's actually the perfect target if they trade Monte Morris. Because if you put DeLon Wright and Bones Highland together, like that is just an awesome, awesome pairing. DeLon Wright's tall at 6'5". He's got a big, or don't think he has a big wingspan, but he gets a lot of steals. He probably just needs a change of scenery though, because he only played like 19 minutes a game in Atlanta last season. His second lowest minute total since his second year in the league back in 2017. So he's probably looking to get out of there. Him with all the guards that Denver has right now, I don't know, but if you're not counting on Monte Morris being here for a while, I think he could be like the perfect complement to a lot of guards that Denver has.
So here's the thing. Why isn't he a good fit as a starter? If you talk about Jamal Murray as a point guard, yes, he's a ball handler. Isn't that important for the continuity offense?
Yeah, I could talk myself into that actually.
He's a defensive first guy who can catch the swing pass and run a DHO with Jokic or a pick and roll with Jokic.
Yeah. I could probably get there on DeLon Wright as a starter. I could.
All these guys, again, they're all like the same caliber. Vogt, do you have a take?
My take is just the overarching one, and that's just what you just said. You know, there's like the higher end version of this player, which you sort of have to be realistic with yourself about getting them. And then there's these guys, which, by the way, this might be enough for Denver. It really might be. It just, you're not going to be like, whoa, chill out with the big splashes over there. You know, like it's DeLon Wright too. It sounds a little underwhelming, but it could just be what the Nuggets need. So,
yeah, you're right. I think I'm almost resigned to the fact that no matter what the Nuggets do, they're going to get killed by the columnists and radio people. Like, the moves that would get them to not be killed by those guys have already passed. So they're going to get killed by those guys, and maybe rightfully so, by the way. I'm not trying to say those guys would be wrong, but even if they are right, I don't think it's going to be proven on July 5th or whatever. It's going to be proven in December if the team looks good. That's when they'll finally be able to say it. But let's take a break. On the other side, the final segment here, we're going to look at second draft guys, like guys that are not good, but hey, maybe they just need to get into that Denver system, as well as some trade topics, which I think the bigger names are all going to be trade type guys. We'll get to that on the other side.
Here's the thing about Ivaca TV. It gets the people going. It gets the Denver sports teams back on your TV. I don't know if you noticed. You probably did. It was a little tough to watch Avalanche and Rapids games and Nuggets games this past season. Ivaca TV stepped in. They stepped between the behemoths here that are in a little bit of a slap fight, and they wanted to reach out to the people and say, we've got Altitude Sports, and we've got AT&T Sportsnet. We've got DNVR channel if you're interested. So just go ahead and download, or just go ahead and get yourself set up, with Ivaca TV, which has service in Denver and Colorado Springs. How do you get it? You go to ivaca.tv/DNVR. That's ivaca.tv/DNVR. Then you use the promo code DNVR. You'll get $10 off your first 3 months. That's only $15 per month for the first 3 months plus receiver. No contract, no hidden fees. Ivaca TV. Check out what all the people are talking about and let them know that we sent you. Also, got to talk to you guys about our collectible friends at FOCO. Nuggets fans, your home for Denver sports coverage, that's us, is partnering with a leader in Denver sports merchandise and collectibles. That's FOCO. FOCO wants you to have access to the best collectibles and gear around. Celebrate the Nuggets back-to-back MVP with this newly released Nikola Jokic MVP bobblehead. Or find your fandom with FOCO's other officially licensed Nuggets gear. Check out their gear and merch. Head over to FOCO.com. Use promo code DNVR for 10% off your order, or click the link below in the YouTube description.
And we back. Final segment here. Going to run through some names, some quick ones here. A hilarious one. This is more. Now, these names are no way Denver is getting these guys in here to start.
Well, Adam, I like how you preface this section with guys who are not good. So my expectations are sky high.
Well, even more importantly, these are guys like if George Karl was grading moves, like he would be like, what are you doing? You're bringing in these guys. But you know what? Sometimes it is like you're in the wrong situation, the wrong culture, what have you. Josh Okogie is a guy that I know the Nuggets liked at the draft, goes to Minnesota, has a decent rookie season, shows some flashes, not so good follow-up seasons after that, completely out of the rotation, and then did not get a qualifying offer. He'll be an unrestricted free agent. Harrison, is there any chance Okogie is a flyer minimum guy, super cheap contract that you're like, you know what, super athletic, 40-inch vertical, great wingspan, defensive first player Like that's a reclamation project. If we're casting a wide net, do you give him like a little veteran, a 1 year minimum deal to see if he blossoms?
Yeah, I'd give him a minimum. Can't shoot it from three or from the line. Can't get on the floor for the Timberwolves, but is a really good defender. He like that's his calling card. You could probably sell it to him as like, look, this is your path to getting back. Like on the forefront of the league, we'll give you a chance to defend. Maybe I'd be down for a minimum, sure.
Vote.
I got lost in the chat sauce there. You got to give me the name again. Are we talking Okogie?
Josh Okogie.
Okogie.
Pretty certain Facu is leaving. Alex has to be leaving. Pretty. I mean, I can't imagine they'd bring him back. I don't think. By the way, this is another thing in talking to the front office. I don't think we're going to see a lot of short guys on the roster going forward. I think that's like I think that's one of the lessons they learned is that they're going to fail big. If they fail, they're not going to fail the small guys.
They gave his locker to Ismail Kamagate. Didn't you guys see?
They would also have failed big, by the way, if their two players were hurt with taller players, but that's fine. Let's blame the short guys first and foremost. No,
just saying.
It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. I'm not particularly moved by Okogie, but I guess I would see the thought process, the flyer you're taking. Would I be like sick? No, I wouldn't.
And it is weird if we start to look at end of bench spots. Peyton Watson, Vlatko Chanchar likely occupying two of those. We're not playing, but we have a roster spot we're taking up. I mean, you got to start. Christian Brown sort of has that, even though we hope he'll play throughout the season. There's only so many of those you can carry. Okogie, to me, I'm intrigued, man. Like I liked Okogie a lot a couple years back. Chris Finch not finding a use for him is very scary to me because I feel like Chris Finch is willing to try. And I just think he'll be like, this is what this guy does. Let's use it. And the fact that there wasn't even a use for him makes me think like, man, maybe this guy really does just not have it.
If it came down to him or Austin Rivers, I'd probably just run it back with Austin Rivers.
You have to. You're in win now mode. Daniel House, unrestricted free agent, career 36.5% three-point field goal shooter. He's 6'6". He played real minutes for Utah last year, by the way. He's another one that has played on a bunch of terrible teams. Last year, Utah Jazz, I know they were a sinking ship. He was brought in because they didn't have enough perimeter defenders, and he was pretty good as a perimeter defender. Daniel House, Harrison?
Yes, that interests me. 6'6" with a long wingspan. He's had some good defensive moments in the past. I don't think he's in the Josh Okogie tier. I think Daniel House is actually kind of good.
Oh, we got to take.
Yeah. How about that?
Where is he playing the rotation?
He's your backup three.
He's your backup three? Man, like we keep doing this with these guys that they're like 6'5". That's a 2, 6'6", 3. Man, he's so small at 6'6".
Name one small forward.
I know that's true. There's not a whole lot of them. But the point is, you still in the playoffs are going to have. That's like the guy on Luka, or like one of the guys you're going to throw at Luka. No,
I mean, I would be interested in House. I would think he's a guy who has the ability to pay off in that signing more than in Okogie. I'm with Wend on that.
Do you like these guys? Just I know it's hard. You have to get the intel. You have to know the player. But like, let's listen to him. So he goes to Washington in 2017. He goes to Phoenix in 2018. By the way, when they were terrible. Then he goes to Houston for 3 straight years. I guess he was in some of the good Houston team, one of the good Houston teams, 2 of the bad ones. Then he's with the Knicks, and then he's with Utah. Not exactly a ton of great cultures. Like Washington, horrible. Phoenix at that time, horrible. Houston, they had a good team, but my God, that was a horrible culture with James Harden for the 1 year. And then he's in the rebuild. Then you go to the Knicks. Like he really was arguably the most inspired you would be by how he performed was last year with Utah. And, that was like a one good team. And even their culture is a little shaky, as we've seen. It was falling apart. He might be the perfect reclamation project where you get him into a good team and a good organization. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, this is how things actually run.
If
my
Daniel
star player isn't drunk.
Yeah. If he does come to the Nuggets, I am going to have to know why he got kicked out of the bubble.
I was just going to say, chat's percolating on that one. That's what
I'm going to need to know about Daniel House if he's nines here.
I feel like that actually kind of cratered his stock. Like he was the kind of guy that would come up in a Zach Lowe podcast like once a week, just like sneaky, underrated. And then the bubble thing happened, and everyone was like, "Yeah, all right, maybe we'll see on House."
Yeah. Is there anybody else, Harrison, that you think warrants a mention? I think because of where we're at time wise, I'm going to roll these trade guys over into tomorrow. They include KCP, Josh Hart, Terrence Mann, Matisse Thybulle, Tim Hardaway Jr., Kelly Oubre, and Kenrich Williams. I think I'll roll these over into tomorrow's show just because we're not going to get through them in 5 minutes, and it might make for a better show for tomorrow. But is there any other free agents that you would like?
Yes. Torian Prince from Minnesota, 6'8".
Ooh,
He's number 6 on my free agent big board. Maybe I'm a little jaded because Prince had like 2 ridiculous games against the Nuggets last season. He
That's
had
true.
23 points on 6 of 9 3-point shooting in a Timberwolves win in February, 16 points, 4 rebounds in another Wolves win in March. But I mean, 6'8", solid veteran, good defender, good 3-point shooter. Like, you could do a lot worse, as we've been talking about. I just feel like he could definitely be a plug-and-play guy, backup small forward on the second unit. He's not going to be somebody Michael Malone's yanking off the floor for making a mistake.
Is he a good defender?
Good enough. I don't think he's elite, but
I don't think that's how I would put him. I think he's like Jamal Murray. Like, he's a good defensive player, but he's not a great one. And so maybe that's all you need is you just need low mistake guys, but he's certainly not going to be a guy that bothers your top guards.
No. And that's not what you would bring him here to be. I just think he would come in as a good, not elite defender, a guy who's definitely above average on that end.
I think your best chance at changing your dynamic as a team in any significant way here is going for the elite defense skill, even at the sacrifice of some other stuff. I mean, the Bruce Brown kind of play, although he's actually not a total zero offensively, but something like that where you're sort of getting creative in how that fifth guy is used alongside more than sufficient firepower. Like all these other moves are like, okay, maybe they sure it up a little bit, but you don't really view the Nuggets differently, I think, versus if they sort of went all in on a defensive savant at 2. That's just a different dynamic altogether. But
yeah, I mean, look, we know the names we've talked about. I don't think any of these guys would totally change the Nuggets dynamic. The only way that can happen is via a trade. They only have $6.3 million to work with this taxpayer exception. So none of these guys are going to change the dynamic. Like I said, like that would happen via trade. I don't see that necessarily happening either. I think we just know what this team is. They just need to stock the roster with more guys that
are playable,
fit the big 3 and are set for a postseason environment.
Yeah. I think a lot of people asking about backup centers. We'll get into that tomorrow, as well as the trade targets at 2, other trade targets at the 3-4 spot. I don't know that Denver's necessarily looking for a bunch of like free agents at 4 or 3. We'll see. I actually expect them to. I would not be surprised if they moved on from Jeff Green. So they might even view themselves as having too many of that to fill some other spots. Yep. There are some interesting names at the backup center position. I just think if you ask me the most urgent need the Nuggets have, it's shooting guards. So I wanted to spend extra time talking about shooting guards today. And then tomorrow, some trade options for those shooting guards as well. That to me just seems almost the more likely.
Me too, man, which is I just want to circle back and say one last time, like that was the thing I didn't like about the Watson pick more than the pick itself. I mean, Watson, I will wait and see about that prospect, but you burn a first to use 2 firsts, and neither are attached to make a significant upgrade when a first plus Monte or Barton maybe would have been your best route to something substantial.
Well, I will say this. I think that the Nuggets front office is viewing we all thought, are they going to push all the chips in for right now because tomorrow's not promised and this or that? And I don't think Denver is. I think Denver looks at this more of, we want to have a good chance to win next year, no question about it, and we'll see what they do in free agency. But I think they view Peyton Watson as a guy that is going to, if he hits, he doesn't just help you a little bit, he helps you a lot at winning a title in 2024, 5, 6. And you might hate that, but they view that look at the compromised position Denver is in now, where they're trying to figure out how to get Gary Payton and Bruce Brown, these good players, but it's like it's so hard. And they don't even know if they could do it. And I think they say you're going to have that every year, trying hard to get B-level players. Peyton Watson could be that A-level Mikal Bridges type, and you've got to take swings for him.
It's just to me that's inconsistent with the win now, championship or bust messaging. But
no question about it's weird messaging, but they certainly view Watson as a player that has that kind of upside, and hopefully he does. I mean, he's my most interesting prospect, but I just don't know. I can't wait to see him at Summer League so I can make a better sense of it. Real quick, Taurean Prince, Harrison, starting shooting guard?
No.
So the Nuggets would get Taurean Prince in a trade and not start him?
He's a backup.
Or sign him in free agency but not start him? Who starts? Is Monte gone in this scenario? If you get Taurean Prince, is Monte not on the roster either?
No, I mean, I think we've all been waiting for the trade for the starting shooting guard to happen. Like, I don't think it's going to be a Barton for starting shooting guard. I would be kind of surprised by that. You're not on the Barton for KCP train anymore?
I do not think that is going to happen, and I feel pretty strongly that is a deal that is not on the table or is not likely to happen.
Interesting. Well, I wonder who they trade Will Barton for then. I mean, you're trying to get back a starting two guard if you're trading Will Barton.
Maybe you're trading him for a backup center and an asset that helps you move something else that you pair with Monte at the deadline, or you pair with Monte in a subsequent deal, or Jeff Green for something else. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But all right. Well, that wraps it up for today, guys. That's a list. Don't forget to check out Harrison Wynn's big board up on thednvr.com. That has all of these people listed out and some of their strengths, weaknesses, as well as a couple of others. And we will be back. Oh, we do have a super chat. Thank you, Kale, for reminding me. Sometimes you just got to hop in and be like, bro, we do have one super chat. Let's get to it. From Philip Brown. He says, love this show. SportsCenter and Fox Sports is a joke. Ultimate respect for taking the risk and building this company up. Bring back Mello. Just kidding. Thanks so much, Philip. We appreciate it, man.
I don't think you're kidding, Philip. I don't think you're just kidding. I think you're dead serious.
Mello, look, man, I'm all for Mello. We listen to another show, but I'm all for Mello coming back to Denver in his final year as a 15th Vlatko Čančar-esque player.
No, let's do 25 minutes on this members-only Discord pod right now.
Yeah, doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
Everybody else, hit that like button on the way out. We'll see you tomorrow.